Most of us own or work for a company that belongs to an industry association. One of the areas that I have never paid much attention to is the lobbying side of an association. So to learn a little bit more about lobbying, I asked Marco Giamberardino, NECA's Senior Vice President of Government and Public Affairs, if he would spend a few minutes educating us on how he spends his days as an association lobbyist. I met Marco at the recent NECA convention, so you will hear some of the background sounds of a convention setting. Now, we recorded this in September of 2023, so a few of the topics discussed have resolved in one way or the other, but I still wanted to share his thought process and how he views budget votes and elections. In addition to lobbying, Marco supervises numerous program areas, including advocacy, public fundraising, communications, marketing, and Electrical Contractor magazine. Marco has been an active trade association professional and advocacy expert for over 30 years. Also, Marco was recognized as a top lobbyist for 2022 by the National Institute for Lobbying and Ethics. Now, I'm your host, Todd Reed, and let's learn a thing or two from Marco on this episode of Keeping the Lights On. Let's get into the show. We start out each episode with the meals that bring us together. So, Marco, if I were to visit you, where might you take me, and why would you choose this place?
So, we found over the last couple of years the best sort of people watching, and of course, can't miss meal. Definitely the Capitol Grill downtown in D.C., especially if Congress is in session. From a Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday period, you're guaranteed to see several senators and probably as many as 20 to 30 House members, all either having dinner, having fundraisers, meeting friends for a drink, and it makes for some pretty great people watching. And sometimes, you can pull somebody aside and have a side conversation, and sometimes I can get more work done there than if I was in an actual official meeting.
Yeah. Well, so in addition to meeting people and seeing people, you probably like to eat there too. So what do you like to order there? What do you recommend?
Oh gosh. Actually, they have a salad that's off the menu. It's a tomato salad with like onions, and they do blue cheese crumbles. So that's a sort of a secret menu item. Of course, a wedge is always good, and then I always do the petite filet because at my age, it's getting harder to eat anything bigger than that these days.
Yeah.
And also, you got to have some sort of seafood over there. They do great chilled seafood.
So I am curious, and I'm sure my listeners are a little bit, what does an association lobbyist do kind of day in and day out? Kind of like, what's your day look like?
Sure. Well, the approach I brought when I came to NECA, having learned from previous jobs I've had, I really wanted to bring, and I thought we had all the tools necessary here to really create a full sort of what I would call a 360-degree approach to advocacy. We have incredible members who are very active. They have great political relationships at home. We have a great base when it comes to our fundraising operation. Our members support everything we do to such a high degree. We outpace every other trade association that I'm aware of in terms of member participation. We have great partnerships with all the other specialty trade groups like SMACNA, mechanical contractors. And then, of course, there's our team, and that's the boots on the ground lobbying. And when you pull that all together, there's so many different ways we can make a difference. Our team specializes on the issues. We know from a technical standpoint what the issues are and how they affect our contractors. We speak to our contractors about them, and we learn from them how it affects their day-to-day business. We're able to relay that information back to members of Congress, their staff. Those are the decision makers. And it's worked really well for us. One of the things that we pride ourselves also is being sort of the expert on all these areas, and we've earned the trust from those decision makers, and they know that they can come to us with questions as they come up. I mean, we'll get calls and emails all the time. Hey, how does this affect your contractors? How does this affect your industry? And because we're able to provide that valid, well thought out, well planned out information that's truthful, they learn to rely on us, so it makes us very effective.
Yeah, that's interesting. I hadn't really thought of that before, that beyond you they come to you for advice. That's pretty interesting.
Yeah.
Or a perspective, I guess.
Sure, or they'll say, can you help us walk through this issue? And we'll do that as well.
Oh, that's great.
So that's another sort of testament to our team. I think one other thing, on the day-to-day, I mean, our days can be just sitting in the office, researching, writing legislation, writing regulatory comments. There's days where it's very political heavy, and we're going to fundraisers, breakfasts, lunches, coffees, dinners, late events. So it's very varied. And of course, when we have folks in town, our contractors come in at various times of the year. We always make sure to set up meetings for them, take them around, make sure they meet with their local officials. So that's the biggest impact. We can do everything we can to tee it up, but at the end of the day, the decision makers on Capitol Hill want to hear from our contractors directly.
What are some of the issues that are in front of your mind that might impact our contract listeners? I know there's one that's really timely, and then we'll talk a little bit more about future stuff as we go. So what's on your mind right now?
Yeah, the thing that's been keeping us up at night, as I like to say, probably for the better part of the last 4 or 5 weeks, is the looming threat of a potential government shutdown. Here we are, Friday afternoon. The government's supposed to shut down at midnight because Congress has not passed all 12 funding bills. And the threat has been out there that there will be a government shutdown. There's been multiple fights over the past 10 days about what's the right package to get out of the House to at least keep the government open. And literally as early this morning, I would have told you it was 100% chance that the government was going to shut down.
Okay.
About an hour ago, the House put that measure up for a vote, and it passed overwhelmingly with bipartisan support. I think only 20 people voted against it. So now that bill is going to get transmitted over to the Senate.
This has been obviously a topic. I mean, it's interesting to me that 3 times or something today you've had like different changing things. So it's just like especially times like this, it's very busy for you, but you're here, and we appreciate your.
Oh, absolutely. Well, and it's so critical because you hear about the government shutting down, or is that such a terrible thing? Well, of course, it does have terrible effects to our economy.
Sure.
But we have so many of our contractors and their partners and their suppliers and all of the other folks in the construction work chain that would get affected by this, especially if they do work for the federal government.
Right.
If there's a federal government shutdown, all those jobs shut down. And nobody's getting paid, nobody's working, and the effects are beyond multiplier effect.
What are some other things that you're thinking about, bills, things that have come up that you're thinking about right now?
So the one thing that's been sort of top of mind is, all these major bills passed last year that we helped get over the finish line, and that was, of course, the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, the CHIPS and Science Act, and then the Inflation Reduction Act. When you total up the potential economic output of those 3 pieces of legislation, you're talking about as much as $4 trillion of work going into our economy, and just mostly to our industry. This is the biggest, really the biggest pot of money that's come to our industry ever. Certainly at this level, and probably the biggest since FDR passed all of the New Deal.
So what is so I hear about it more just because I'm in the business, but you kind of hear about it when it's passed and people kind of get excited about it, but then you don't hear about it as much. Now, we might, but how long does it take for that money to kind of trickle out? I mean, if it's signed, does it happen eventually? It just might take more than...
It's taking a little while. I mean, it certainly takes a lot of time to put that money out that level of money out on the street.
Yeah.
So the first year, we've seen some money start to trickle out.
Okay.
I'm expecting to see the majority of that money come out probably in the next year to the next 3 or 4 years.
Oh, okay.
And then it's going to sort of ramp back down over those last 5 years. This is a 10-year project, is the way we're looking at this.
Okay.
And one of the biggest challenges that we're trying to navigate for our members is what are the agencies up to in trying to push this money out? Because it's in the form of grants, it's in the form of federal contracts. Sometimes it's a mix of both. And like any good bureaucracy, sometimes these jobs get held up in the pipeline at the agency level because there's a lot of work that crosses over between the Department of Transportation and the Department of Energy. Those two departments have created a joint office, and it seems more like they've been spending so much time staffing up that joint agency to get that work out than actually putting the work out on the street.
No.
And we've expressed that frustration to the administration.
Okay.
But we understand that there's a process, and it makes sense on paper to do it that way, but it doesn't make sense if it's going to hold up to jobs out there.
Right. So what are some of the other issues that, besides those acts, that you're thinking about and talking to the your contacts about?
Sure. Probably the number one issue we've spent time on this year was permitting reform. I mentioned all the amount of work that's coming. One of the biggest things we heard from our contractors is if all this money's coming down the pike and we don't change the current permitting laws, those jobs are not only going to be delayed getting out on the street, they're going to be delayed in the review pipeline. So that's, legal reform is huge there, and I think it's something that everybody agrees on. I think the final solution ultimately, now that the House did a lot of work there, the Senate is looking to create some sort of final comprehensive permitting reform package that I think we'll probably see action on towards the end of the year. No one's against permitting reform in principle, and it's widely recognized that for all this new work to come out on the street, we have to get this done. So, and President Biden said, just send me something and I'll sign it. He's made it that easy for the Congress to do. So
interesting.
We're pushing hard on the Senate right now.
How would you answer someone that comes up to you in the construction industry specifically, from a new hire to a business owner, and they say, Marco, what can I do to make a difference? Because it all seems quite large, and I'm just one person. So,
sure. To me, the biggest thing is try to be involved, and it doesn't mean you have to come to Washington and meet with your member of Congress several times a year or be some big fat cat donor or anything like that. Just be involved, be in the know. Honestly, I always tell our contractors, don't watch the news channels all that much, because all they're doing is feeding you information to either confirm what you already believe or don't believe. Try to read some of the more outlier newsletters like 1440 or Morning Brew. Politico's still pretty good. Axios is still pretty good. If you want to try to be involved, go to like a town hall meeting where a member of Congress or even a local official, or try to be involved in, one thing, if you want to educate an elected official on this industry, invite them to your office, invite them to a job site, invite them to the training center. Those visits are the most eye-opening experiences back home for elected officials more than anything else. From a congressional standpoint, think about this. Every congressman represents about 700,000 people. There's no way they know what electrical contractors do. There's no way they know what electricians do, unless they are one. Right. And there's only one elected electrician in Congress right now.
Oh, really?
Don Norcross from New Jersey. So the more we can educate these elected officials on the work we do, the impact that this industry has, that's how you can really make a difference.
Okay, that's great. Nice things, tangible things to do. Marco, I like to close out the conversations by refocusing on the why of what we do. So what motivates you to do this day in and day out? What keeps you excited and passionate about what you do?
So I always, for some reason, had an interest in politics. I was never interested in doing campaigns so much, but I was always interested in the operations of government. Somehow I was able to marry that with my dad was a trades guy. He was a painting contractor, union painter in New York City. Eventually became a contractor, owned his own business. He would not let me go into the family business. He told me, he was an immigrant from Italy, and he said, this begins and ends with me. I created this so you could go do other things.
Wow.
And so I was like, okay, I guess I got to figure this out. So I got it. I just happened to take a few college classes, and I sort of fell into this path of, getting involved in Washington and really harnessing my passion. So getting into the construction industry and representing NECA, especially these last almost 12 years, it kind of marries everything I grew up around and know and love.
Yeah.
And getting to know our contractors, all the partners involved, it really is what motivates me more than anything else. Knowing that we can help affect and help our members' bottom line is what really keeps me going.
Well, that's great. It does seem like something that would take a lot of passion to be involved, because it can be a negative thing, kind of environment, especially in the last few years. So, I think it's great that you're in there, and it takes that passion, I think, to keep in there and keep fighting the good fight, whatever that fight is.
I appreciate it.
Yep. So, Marco, thank you so much for being here. It's been great having you on the show.
Yeah, thank you. This has been awesome, and enjoy another great NECA convention and trade show.
Yep, it'll be great.
All right.
That was my conversation with Marco Giamberardino, Senior Vice President, Government and Public Affairs for NECA. You can connect with Marco and what he's working on by heading to the links in the show notes. If you enjoyed this episode, you can help us grow this show by leaving a 5-star rating and subscribing in your favorite podcast player. Thanks for listening to this episode of Keeping the Lights On. We'll see you next time.